She never flinched when the fire took the stables, just walked straight into the smoke, dragging 3 horses out with a broken arm and eyes that didn't blink. They called her Mop before that, laughed at her scars, mocked her silence. But after the blaze, no one spoke her name without a whisper. Because what followed Lena Calderon from Granite Ridge wasn't just trauma. It was something older, hungrier. Now, strange symbols are burning into the barn walls. Horses refuse to enter stall 3, and the wind keeps whispering the names of the dead. And she's the only one who remembers why. No one paid much mind to the new girl. She kept her head down, didn't speak unless spoken to, and worked the stalls with quiet determination that made the others uneasy, not because she was slow or lazy, but because she never seemed to tire, first to arrive, last to leave, hands calloused raw by the second day. Mornings found her elbow deep in hay and horse shit. Evenings ended with her wiping blood from saddle straps without complaint. The others called her Mop, short for Mophead, because of the thick mess of dark curls she refused to cut, because she didn't correct them when they said it, because she let them laugh. Especially Bryce Keller. 21, built like a show pony and proud of it. He was the boss's nephew, and he walked like the ranch was his inheritance. Slick grin, shiny boots. Never lifted anything heavier than a clipboard. He made fun of everyone, but he targeted her. "Careful, Mop," he said one day, lounging against a post while she shoveled manure. "You keep working like that, we'll mistake you for a real horse." The boys laughed. She didn't, just kept shoveling, eyes down, silent. It got under Bryce's skin. He'd come back the next day with something meaner than the next, always expecting a reaction, a win, but she never gave it to him until the week of the fire. It started in the east paddock. No one knew how. Dry lightning, maybe, or a tossed cigarette. Flames jumped the fence like they had purpose. The wind drove it hard and fast. Within minutes, the stables were a furnace. Everyone ran. Most grabbed what they could, led horses to safety, threw buckets of sand, yelled names. But she didn't run. She charged in. 2 stallions were still tied. A mare had bolted, panicked, and gotten stuck in the far stall. Smoke poured from every rafter. Wood cracked overhead. No one else dared enter, but she did. Bryce watched, useless and coughing, as the new girl vanished into the fire with only a rope and her bare hands. Minutes passed. Then, through the black, a shape stumbled out. One horse, then another, then the mare, then her. Hair singed, face blackened with ash, one arm clearly broken. She collapsed at the fence line, wheezing, clutching the bridle of the last horse like it was sacred. Bryce didn't speak, didn't move, didn't know what to say. Later, after the flames were out and the vet finished checking the animals, the ranch hands gathered in the mess hall. The boss was there too, a quiet older man with one bad leg and a reputation for watching more than he spoke. He walked to the corner wall, the one with the old photographs, yellowed and framed in dust. They called it the Wall of Heroes, photos of ranchers long dead, men and women who'd saved lives, pulled riders from stampedes, dived into floods, faced wolves, and worse. He pointed to a photo already there, faded from another time. "She doesn't like to talk about it," he said, "but you all should know." The photo showed a younger version of her, same eyes, same curls, in uniform. Below it, Sergeant Lena Rose Calderon, Fire Watch, 6th Battalion, Granite Ridge Wildfire Response. Awarded the Silver Axe for rescuing 14 fire-trapped civilians, 3 team members, and 9 livestock. Declared missing for 72 hours before returning on foot with 2 wounded teammates across 14 miles of burn. Bryce stared. The boss turned to him. "She didn't come here to be thanked. She came here to heal. You all made that harder." Bryce opened his mouth. No words came out. From that day forward, no one called her Mop. They just watched her work, silent with respect, and moved aside when she passed. because now they knew what she'd been trying to forget. That night, Lena sat alone at the far end of the bunkhouse porch, legs stiff, arm in a sling, cigarette untouched between her fingers. The others stayed inside. No one said her name. No one looked her way. But they all watched the smoke curl around her silhouette through the window, too ashamed to speak and too afraid to ask. Bryce couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her face, covered in soot, eyes locked on the flames like she was staring down something familiar, like she knew fire on a first-name basis. That's what rattled him most, not the risk she took, not the heat, but how still she'd been, not brave, not stupid, resigned, like she expected the fire, like it was waiting for her. 3 days passed before anyone brought it up. The old ranch boss pulled Bryce aside after the noon hay run. "You see the tree line lately?" he asked. "No." "You should." So Bryce did. He took the mule cart out past the northern fence where the scorched brush still lay flat and the earth wore the fire like a scar. That's when he saw them. Prints, not boot prints, bare feet. Small, scattered in pairs that didn't make sense, too wide apart, wrong angles. They led into the woods, but not out. He followed them for 20 yards before the wind shifted. The air changed, the heat came back, not from the sun, but from the soil, like standing over a smoldering pit. That's when he turned back. He didn't say a word to anyone when he returned. But that night, Lena came to him. He found her waiting in the stables, leaning against stall 3 like she'd been carved from ash and moonlight. She didn't say his name, just, "You followed them." "Yeah," Bryce said. "They're not done yet." "Who?" She looked at the dark horizon. Her voice dropped. "The ones we left behind. I thought everyone made it out." Her silence said otherwise. Lena lit the cigarette finally, took a drag, exhaled slowly. "There were 14 I pulled out. 3 teammates, 9 livestock. That's what the award says." He nodded. "But they never count what comes back with you." Bryce frowned. "You mean guilt?" She shook her head. "I mean them." She dropped the cigarette into the dirt and crushed it with her heel. Then she said the name of the fire. Granite Ridge. The wind moaned. Somewhere out in the trees something answered, not an echo, a mimic, repeating her voice exactly. They both froze. Lena closed her eyes. "They remember," she whispered, "and they found me." The next morning, the horses wouldn't go near stall 3, not a single one. They kicked, bucked, pulled away from their reins. Even the old gelding, Doc, calm as rain, reared and snapped a lead rope trying to get away from the door Lena had leaned against the night before. Bryce saw it happen. He didn't ask questions anymore. That same afternoon, the vet found claw marks on the barn wall. Not scratches, not random patterns. Perfect loops with 4 long slashes through the center, repeating in a wide arc, as though something circled the barn all night, carving the mark over and over again. Lena stood at the edge of the field, hands in her coat pockets, eyes fixed on the tree line. The same prints had returned, only now they were deeper, pressed into the ground like whatever made them was growing heavier by the day. That night Lena didn't sleep. Neither did Bryce. They sat on the porch in silence, listening to the wind die and the darkness settle around the ranch like a second skin. Lena finally spoke. "It wasn't supposed to follow me." Bryce waited. "At Granite Ridge," she said, "we weren't the first team in. Another squad had gone in 2 days before. Lost contact. Smoke was too thick for choppers, so they sent us in blind. Found their gear, their boots, helmets, radios." "No bodies?" She shook her head. "Not at first." "And then?" "One of my teammates heard something. Thought it was a survivor. We followed the sound, got separated. When I found her again, she was—" Lena paused. She wasn't dead, but she wasn't herself anymore. Her mouth moved, but it wasn't her voice. It was mine. Bryce stared at her. "I dragged her out anyway," Lena said. "I had to, but the others we left behind, I think they changed. I think the fire did something to them." or revealed something. She lit another cigarette, hands trembling. They made it look like heroism, silver axe, photos, applause, but I knew. When I left, it wasn't over. Not for me, not for them. A low thump echoed from the far stable, followed by a second. Then a dragging sound, slow and rhythmic, like a wet tarp pulled across hay. Lena stood immediately. They're here. Bryce followed, flashlight in one hand, rope in the other. The barn door groaned open. Every stall was empty, even the locked ones. Hay scattered like a storm had passed through. The lanterns on the walls were shattered, the glass melted in curling vines. On the far wall, right where the claw marks had been, the patterns had changed. No longer loops, now letters, 2 words. Stay dead. The flashlight flickered. Bryce spun. A shadow darted past stall 6, low and fast, dragging something behind it. Lena pulled the fire axe from the wall, the same one she'd used the night of the fire. The blade still singed, the handle blackened. "Whatever came back with me," she said, "isn't whole." "Can it be killed?" Bryce asked. She didn't answer. Outside, the wind died. Then something knocked once. From beneath the barn, not loud, not frantic, just patient. Knock, knock, knock. The horses screamed. Lena's grip tightened. "They're coming through." "What do we do?" She looked him dead in the eye. "We burn them again." They started by dousing the barn perimeter in kerosene. Buckets at every post, ropes soaked and ready. Bryce dragged old saddle blankets into a ring, creating a firewall the size of a livestock pen. Lena moved with precision, no fear, no hesitation, every motion rehearsed like she'd done this before. Because she had. Only this time, she wasn't running in to save others. She was staying to stop what followed her home. "They need form," she said, drawing the sigil in ash across the main door. "That's the rule. Fire gives them shape, but memory gives them names. That's how they pass over." Bryce set down his lighter. "You mean they become the people we remember?" Lena nodded. Granite Ridge wasn't just a wildfire. It was a tear, and something came through it. Bryce stared at her hands, scarred, stained, burned more than once. Not just from firefighting, from fighting fire itself. "What are they?" he asked. Lena didn't speak, didn't have to, because that's when the first one arrived. It walked straight out of the dark behind the water tower, human-shaped, but off, too tall, arms that didn't bend quite right, legs that bent backward. Its head was crowned with a helmet melted to the scalp. Flames danced inside the eye sockets like candlelight behind fogged glass. And the voice, "Lena?" But it wasn't a question. It was an accusation. She stood between it and the barn. Held up the axe. "I told you not to follow me." It opened its mouth. Smoke poured out. Not smoke. Names whispered in ash. Dozens of them. Rapid fire. Repeating. Her teammates. Her squad. Every firefighter she'd lost in the blaze. Their voices all inside this thing, twisting its limbs like marionette strings. She didn't flinch. "I remember you," she said, "and I let you go." The creature took one step. Bryce dropped the torch. The fire caught instantly. The ring of flame surged high, blue, not orange, pure, hungry. The creature screamed, not in pain, but in recognition. The fire knew it. It backed up, but not before another joined it. Then another, 3, 5, 7, all walking, all twisted, all wearing the faces of the dead. The barn shook behind them. Lena turned to Bryce. "This is the line." "We hold it?" She shook her head. "We end it." Then she stepped into the flames. The flames wrapped around her like an old friend. Not consuming, not burning, accepting. Bryce watched in awe, frozen at the edge of the fire ring as Lena walked forward, axe in hand, the inferno parting around her like a curtain drawn back for a final act. Her silhouette glowed, not from the heat but from something within. A pulse, a memory-turned weapon. The smoke creatures recoiled. not because of the fire, but because of her. She stepped toward them without flinching. "You remember their names," she said, "but you forgot mine." The first one lunged. Lena spun the axe in a perfect arc. It struck the creature across the chest, splitting it open, not flesh, but flame. White fire spilled from the wound. It didn't fall. It evaporated. The smoke screamed, tried to retreat into the dirt, but the ash circle burned hotter and held the shape in place until there was nothing left. Another charged. This one wore her sergeant's face. She paused just for a second. That's all it took. It reached for her, whispering a name. Not hers. Her sister's. "Rosa." The word hit like a blow. Bryce saw her stumble, saw the axe falter. The creature wrapped its arms around her, flames crawling down its limbs like vines. Smoke poured into her mouth, her eyes. Then she breathed in, deep, deliberate, and exhaled fire. It poured from her lips in a wide arc, pushing the creature back into the blaze, screaming, splintering, until only sparks remained. Then she stood again, taller, stronger. The fire circled her now like a crown. 3 more creatures rushed her. She didn't raise the axe this time. She simply whispered the names of the dead, and the fire answered. Each name called down lightning from the blaze. Each strike hit with a sound like doors slamming in hell. When the 7th one fell, the wind shifted. The earth trembled. The barn behind Bryce groaned, and for a moment he thought it would collapse. Then silence. The creatures were gone. The fire ring dimmed. Lena turned. Her face streaked with soot, her eyes burning gold. "It's done," she said. But Bryce shook his head. "No, look." He pointed to the barn wall, where the message had once read, "Stay dead." New words had burned into the wood. "One ash remains." Lena collapsed. Bryce caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was hot to the touch, feverish, but not burning. Her skin radiated heat like sun-warmed metal. He dragged her back from the smoldering ring, laid her gently in the dirt, and checked her pulse. Steady, strong. But her eyes wouldn't open. Her breathing was shallow, like she was somewhere else, trapped in smoke. He looked up at the barn wall. "One ash remains." It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. He stood, eyes scanning the field, the barn, the dark beyond the fence. No movement, no sound. Just the wind slowly picking up again, natural, ordinary wind, cool and sharp through the trees. Then he saw it, a trail of soot, barely visible, leading away from the fire ring, away from the barn, out toward the hills beyond the paddock, one long streak like something had been dragged. Not a body, a shape. He grabbed the fire axe Lena had dropped, its blade still glowing faintly, and followed. The trail curved behind the north corral, then down into the ravine, a gash in the land no one used anymore, filled with broken fencing and old cattle bones. The air was thick again. Still. Too still. Halfway down he found it. Not a creature, not a ghost. A pile of ash, perfectly coned, undisturbed, and resting in the center, a boot. Not Lena's, Bryce knew it. He'd seen it once in a photo hung on the wall of heroes. Tread worn smooth, lace burnt halfway through, the name scratched into the heel. R. Calderon, Rosa, Lena's sister, dead 18 months before Granite Ridge. Killed in a training accident, they said. But the file had been sealed, redacted. Bryce stared at the boot, at the ash, at the impossible presence it radiated. And then he heard a voice behind him. Lena, barely above a whisper. She didn't die in training. He turned. She stood there, swaying, bleeding from one arm, eyes hollow. She died in that fire. Rosa was the first thing the ridge took. I just didn't realize it until it was too late. Bryce didn't know what to say. Lena walked past him, dropped to her knees in front of the ash pile, reached out, hesitated, then touched the boot. The ash swirled, rose into the air like steam, wrapped around her hand, her wrist, her chest. She didn't pull away. She stayed because I couldn't let her go, Lena whispered. Because I kept her alive inside me, and now she won't move on unless I do. Bryce stepped forward, then let her. I'm trying. The ash thickened, coiled tighter. Lena grit her teeth, then whispered her sister's name one last time. Rosa. The wind howled. A scream filled the ravine, high, sharp, inhuman, and then silence. The ash collapsed. The boot was gone. Lena sagged. Bryce caught her again. This time she smiled, and the heat finally left her skin. 3 weeks later, the ranch felt whole again. The scorch marks had faded. The horses grazed calmly. No prints in the dirt, no claw marks on the barn walls, just sun, dust, the smell of fresh hay and oiled leather. For the first time in months, the wind didn't carry whispers. Lena healed slowly. Her burns faded, but her strength took longer to come back. She spent her mornings brushing the horses in silence, her afternoons sitting beneath the cedar tree that overlooked the north paddock, her arm in a sling, her eyes always scanning the tree line. Bryce kept close. He didn't ask questions anymore. He knew the answers wouldn't make sense to most. But he'd seen. He'd heard the voices, felt the heat from the seal. He knew the boss never brought it up. But one morning, just after dawn, he unlocked the mess hall and tacked a new photo to the wall of heroes. A black and white image. Lena, standing in the ashes, smoke curling behind her, axe in hand. Below it, in block print, Lena R. Calderon, Granite Ridge Unit 6th Battalion, fought to protect life, memory, and land. Let the fire rest now. She didn't say anything when she saw it, just stood there, then nodded. The next day she cut her hair, tied it back, and showed up to breakfast with the same calm as always, but something in her eyes had changed. She wasn't running anymore. Whatever had followed her from Granite Ridge had been buried in that final breath of ash, not destroyed, not erased, but laid to rest. And sometimes, late at night, when the breeze shifted and the porch light flickered just once, she'd whisper her sister's name into the dark, not out of fear, out of love. Because some flames don't burn to destroy, some burn to carry us home. That night the wind returned. It wasn't sharp like before. It was warm, heavy, and it carried the scent of smoke. Lena felt it first. She'd been sleeping in the tack room, the smell of saddle oil and dried hay like a blanket over memory, but she sat up fast, eyes wide before she was fully awake. Something had shifted. Not loud, not sudden, subtle, like a door left open just long enough for something to slip back through. She got dressed in the dark. Outside the moon hung low, orange, like it had watched 1,000 fires and never warned a soul. Lena stepped out into the yard, barefoot. The ground was warm beneath her feet, too warm. She didn't call for Bryce. This was hers. She followed the warmth, past the barn, past the paddocks, out beyond the ridge where the final fire had ended. There, in the middle of a blackened clearing, the ash pile had returned. But it was different this time. Not Rosa's. This one was smaller, tighter, intentional. And in the center of the ash, no boot, a badge, melted, blackened beyond recognition, but she knew its shape. The same badge the fire watch kept clipped to their shoulder harness. She knelt, touched it. The wind died. The air thickened. And all at once she was back in the smoke, not physically. Memory, the way it truly happened. Granite Ridge, the real version, the one she never told command, the one buried under 100 pages of classified ink. She saw them again, her team, Wren, Alvarez, Jensen, Rosa, all dead, except they hadn't died from the fire. They'd died from what the fire let in. It hadn't started natural. There were symbols on the trees, carvings in the earth. She saw them now with terrifying clarity. Glyphs older than the land, older than words, carved deep into the ridge before the lightning ever struck. Something had been summoned there, and her unit had stumbled into its wake. The fire had merely opened the door wider. She saw herself in the dream, dragging Rosa's body, screaming for help, stumbling through the ash and heat. Then, the shadow, behind her, moving like it wore her grief as a skin. It had whispered her name, not in malice, in recognition, because she belonged to it now. Her badge flared white in her hand. The memory shattered. She gasped, awake again, kneeling in the dirt. The badge was still there. But now, something was written on it. Letters burned into the scorched metal. RC Unit 6, still watching. Lena stood, hand trembling. Behind her, something stirred in the grass. She turned. Bryce, holding a lantern. He looked at the badge, then at her face. "What did you see?" he asked. Lena didn't speak for a long time, and then, the fire was never just fire. It was a test. For what? To see who remembers. She looked back at the ashes. "We passed, but that doesn't mean they've stopped watching." 2 nights later, the rain came, hard, sudden. The kind of downpour that smothered fire, drowned sound, and made every surface slick with memory. The storm rolled in from the east without warning. No lightning, no wind, just thick curtains of water and a sky that didn't want to be seen. Lena didn't shelter. She stood in it, at the edge of the paddock, drenched to the bone, watching the tree line. Because in the cracks of thunder, between the slaps of rain against the roof, she heard them again. The names. Rosa, Jensen, Alvarez. Over and over, half-whispered and carried through the downpour like a chant, unraveling from the roots of the land. Bryce came out onto the porch, coat over his shoulders, hat dripping. "You all right?" She didn't answer, just pointed. "They're walking the ridge again." He followed her gaze. Couldn't see anything, just soaked trees and wet fences, but he'd learned enough not to doubt her anymore. "How many?" he asked. "All of them," she said. By morning, the storm was gone, and the air was full of steam. Mist rose off every surface like the land was exhaling. Bryce found the horses restless again, stomping, flaring nostrils, eyes wild. The same way they'd acted before the final fire, before the creatures took form. In the barn, he found something new, carved into the stall door Lena had leaned against during that first blaze. Not a threat, not a word. A map, a crude one, lines scratched with something sharp. He traced them with his fingertips, rivers, hills, then a circle, marked right in the heart of Granite Ridge. Not where the fire started, where it ended, and beneath it, initials burned into the wood. RC, LC, JA, WK. Names the dead. Or maybe not, maybe something using them. He brought it to Lena. She studied it without blinking. "They're calling us back," she said. "Why?" "Because someone's still there." Bryce frowned. "No one's been near Granite Ridge since the closure." "Not alive," Lena said. She pointed to the circle. "This isn't a warning. It's a request." That night she packed what she'd buried. The badge, the axe, the last of the red dust. The photo she said she burned but never did. Bryce met her at the barn with 2 horses and a rifle slung across his back. "You sure about this?" he asked. Lena looked out across the fields. The sun had just dropped, and the first line of fog was creeping back down the trees like fingers made of breath. "They remember who left," she said. "I need them to know I came back." They rode out before midnight. No words, just hooves on wet ground and the silent weight of history pressing down from the sky. The farther they rode, the colder the night became. No stars, no moon. The path to Granite Ridge hadn't been used in years. It was barely visible now. Trees had bent over it. Grass had swallowed the wheel ruts. But Lena didn't hesitate. She knew every turn, every rise, every sound the land made when it was about to whisper. They reached the edge of the ridge just before dawn. Mist covered everything. But in the center of the valley, a fire burned. Not a campfire, not a brush blaze, a signal, a beacon. Controlled, deliberate, waiting. Lena dismounted slowly. Her hands didn't shake, but her shoulders did. Bryce touched her arm. "Is it them?" She nodded. "They want to finish what we interrupted." "What does that mean?" "It means I wasn't the only one who walked away, and now they want us all back." The path into Granite Ridge was no longer a trail. It was a scar. Charred tree trunks stood like burnt bones on either side, blackened and brittle. The earth beneath their boots gave off a low heat, like it remembered being fire. Even after all these years, nothing had grown back. Not a blade of grass, not a weed, just soot and silence. Lena walked first. Bryce followed, rifle in hand, every step heavier than the last. The stillness of the place clawed at his ears. No insects, no birds, not even the sound of their own footsteps. It was as if sound itself had abandoned this place long ago, and something else had taken its place. Watching, listening, waiting. They passed the rusted husk of a fire engine, half buried in ash, its ladder twisted like bone. A helmet lay nearby, cracked down the middle. Bryce picked it up, turned it over, and froze. Inside were teeth, human, molars, incisors, burned black at the root. He dropped it. Lena didn't look back. She was following something older than memory now. They reached the clearing at the heart of the ridge just as the fog began to thin. The fire they'd seen was still burning, contained in a perfect circle, ringed by stones that hadn't been there before. Smooth, red-veined, each one carved with the same symbol, a spiral inside a handprint. Bryce looked around. Who built this? Lena stepped into the edge of the circle. They did. A figure stepped from the fog, tall, wrapped in ash-colored robes. Its face was hidden behind a melted mask of bone and glass. The figure didn't speak, just raised one hand, palm open, showing the spiral mark. Lena stepped forward. Bryce grabbed her arm. "Are you seeing this?" She nodded. They were the ones who answered the first call, long before us, before settlers, before stories. "The fire cult?" She shook her head. "Not a cult. A guard. But the fire got smarter. It stopped burning trees and started burning memories. That's why it never dies. That's why it keeps pulling us back." The masked figure pointed to the center of the ring. There, lying in the dirt, was a photo. Lena picked it up. Her and Rosa. Rosa was smiling. Lena wasn't. Bryce looked over her shoulder. "That's not just a photo, is it?" "No," Lena said. "It's a key." The ground trembled. The fire flared. A ring of light spiraled upward from the stones, and then the voices began again. Dozens, maybe hundreds, whispering not in fear, but in prayer. From the fog, more figures emerged, all masked, all marked, each one holding something from Lena's past, an axe, a helmet, a locket, a melted badge. She turned slowly, eyes wide, but unafraid. "They're giving it back," she whispered. "Giving what back?" Bryce asked. "My memory." The light surrounded her. Not hot, not blinding, but full, like stepping into a memory that had never been hers but somehow belonged to her blood. The masked figures began to chant, low and unified, each voice like a coal dropped into silence. The spiral on the stones pulsed in time with her breath. The fire no longer burned, it glowed. And in the center, where the earth was split open just enough to reveal the char beneath, Lena knelt. The photo trembled in her hand. A wind rose, not natural, not wind at all, but presence. It filled the space above them like a sky returning to a place it had abandoned. The first figure stepped forward and removed its mask. Beneath was Rosa, not her ghost, not an echo, but Rosa, exactly as she'd looked the last day Lena saw her, before the screaming, before the ash, before the badge was melted to her chest. "Hi, Len," she said. Lena didn't cry, not yet. Her voice cracked like old kindling. "You were supposed to be gone." "I stayed," Rosa said, kneeling across from her. "Someone had to." "You stayed in the fire." "No," Rosa said. "I became the fire." Bryce took a slow step back. The other masked figures turned toward him. He gripped his rifle, unsure if he was allowed to be here. Rosa looked at him and smiled. "You brought her back. Thank you." Then she reached forward and touched Lena's forehead. The memory hit like lightning. Lena saw the first fire. Not Granite Ridge, not modern, old, ancient, before settlers, before maps. A fire summoned not by accident or nature, but by need, called by the ones who lived closest to the land. Fire was not just destruction. It was communication, a voice loud enough for the forgotten gods to hear, and they did. But not all gods should answer. Something else heard the call. It came through the flame, shaped like man, but made of hunger and ash. It offered protection, power, memory that never faded. It asked only one thing in return: keep burning. The bargain was accepted, and ever since, the fire had lived here, waiting, passing from one watcher to the next, choosing those who remembered pain with enough clarity to light the match again. Granite Ridge was just the latest offering, and Lena, she had ended the cycle without knowing how deep it went. The fire had chosen her, but she refused to feed it, until now. Rosa's hand fell away. Lena gasped. The fire dimmed. The masked figures stepped back. "You saw it," Rosa said. "I did." "Then you understand." Lena stood. "I do." And she turned her back on the fire, walked out of the circle. Bryce followed, unsure whether to feel afraid or relieved. As they crossed the ridge, the ground behind them began to collapse, not violently, but like a mouth closing after a final word. The fire was not extinguished, but it had been satisfied. Lena spoke as they rode back toward the ranch. "No more offerings, she said. "No more fire lines." Bryce looked over. "Then what now?" She gripped the reins tighter. "We bury it," she said. "Deep." And the next day they did. The burial wasn't symbolic. It was real, physical, painful. They rode out with shovels, salt, a sealed lockbox, and 3 items Lena had never wanted to see again: the melted badge, the spiral-marked helmet, and the last of the red dust. Bryce didn't ask what the box would have made of, but he noticed the interior was lined with lead and old river stone, smoothed flat and marked with glyphs that pulsed faintly in the early morning light. They buried it where the fire had first answered. Not at the ridge, deeper. Near the dry creek bed, below the barn, where the horses never stepped, where the grass never grew. Lena dug until her hands bled. Bryce said nothing. He dug too. When the box was sealed and laid into the earth, Lena poured the red dust in a wide ring around the hole. She didn't light it. Not this time. This wasn't about destruction. It was about silence. "We don't speak the names again," she said. "Not mine. Not theirs. The fire knows them already." Bryce nodded. "You think that's enough?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But it's all we've got." They covered the hole. No marker. No stone. Just earth and silence. The wind didn't move when they left. It watched. Back at the ranch, Lena returned to her work like nothing had changed. She mucked stalls. She fixed fence wire. She sat on the porch at dusk with her boots off and eyes closed, breathing in dust and the scent of horses. But Bryce knew something had changed. He saw it in the way the flames bent toward her when she lit the lantern. He heard it in the quiet, when the wind still whispered names sometimes, but stopped when she looked up. And once, late at night, when the cattle grew restless, he found Lena in the center of the yard, barefoot in her nightclothes, standing dead still. He didn't call her name. He just watched. She turned slowly, looked at him, and said, "It's not gone." He stepped forward. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed toward the old well, the one that hadn't worked in years, the one sealed with stone. Water trickled from its edge now, warm, and glowing faintly red. The water shouldn't have been warm. Not from that well. It had been dry since the first season Lena arrived. No rainfall could reach it now. The stone cover had been sealed with concrete and weight and silence. Nothing should have moved beneath it. And yet it dripped thick, rhythmic, almost like it pulsed, not like water, like blood. Lena crouched beside it, her hand hovering just above the surface. The glow shimmered upward with each drop. Red-orange, faint, but alive. Bryce stood back, watching the condensation bead on her arms. "It followed us," he said flatly. Lena didn't respond right away. Her eyes traced the rim of the stone, then the hairline fracture that now split the seal across the top. "No," she said at last. "It never left. We've been watching the fire above, but it was always below." Bryce's grip tightened around the lantern handle. "What is it?" She rose slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans. "The root system," she said. Granite Ridge wasn't a flame. It was a flare. The surface expression. But the source? She looked down at the stone. It runs deeper. Beneath the valley, beneath the fields. It's old. Older than memory. It doesn't live in fire. It uses fire to wake. Bryce turned slowly toward the ridge. The hills beyond the barn looked the same. Quiet. Still. Unchanged. But something about their shape felt different now. The shadows along the base ran longer than they should have. The tree line curved a little too perfectly, like it was following the contour of something buried just beneath the soil. Lena looked back toward the house. Her eyes lingered on the porch, then the barn, then the old fence post, where the horses always hesitated. She'd always thought it was instinct, animals sensing ash and pain. But now she knew it wasn't fear of fire. It was reverence, recognition. They weren't avoiding a memory. They were honoring something old. That night she didn't sleep. She sat by the well with a coil of rope and a thermos of bitter coffee, her eyes fixed on the slow pulse of light from the cracks. She'd seen similar pulses once before, during controlled burns out west. Fire lines that glowed long after they'd supposedly gone out, where heat stayed in the roots of trees, in the bones of the land, refusing to die. Those burns were never clean, because some fires, once they started, remembered where they came from. And worse, they remembered you. Just before dawn, the water stopped dripping. The glow faded. Lena stood. She heard it before she saw it. A creak, wooden, rhythmic, like a door opening slowly, very far below her feet. She dropped the thermos, grabbed the axe, and waited. Nothing came out, but a smell did. Not smoke, not sulfur, not rot. Something older, like cedar left in a sealed tomb for 1,000 years, like something sacred forgotten on purpose. Bryce came running from the bunkhouse, breath ragged. "You smell that?" Lena nodded. He looked at the well. "Is it rising?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the ridge. Her voice was steady. "They're not sending fire this time." Bryce looked at her. "Then what?" She didn't blink. "They're sending form." The wind shifted around them, not in gusts, in circles, spiraling slow and wide, dragging dust in patterns that matched the symbols Lena had seen etched into stone back at the ridge. Handprints, spirals, flame marks, coiled inside runes she couldn't read but somehow understood. The well had stopped glowing. Yes, but the air hadn't cooled. It had thickened, like it was waiting to be inhaled, like it wanted inside. "They're sending form," Bryce repeated, voice dry. "You mean like those things back at the barn?" Lena shook her head. "No, those were echoes, shadows shaped by fire and fear." She looked toward the pasture. "This is the original." It was waking up, not a creature, not a god. A concept made flesh. Memory, turned inside out. The land itself, rising. Back in the house, the light bulbs began to buzz. The floorboards creaked without weight. The kettle on the stove, cold and untouched, whistled on its own. Bryce stepped toward the porch, hesitating. Lena didn't move. "It's not haunting us," she said. "It's looking for something." "What?" She turned to face him fully. "Me." Bryce's throat dried. "Lena, I tied myself to it the day I survived Granite Ridge. Everyone who dies in fire gives up something, but everyone who survives takes something with them. I carried it for years, buried it, burned it, drowned it. She looked down at her hands. It still remembers me. The well creaked behind her, stone scraped. And then, impossibly, the sealed top split wider, without tools, without pressure. Just peeled open like a blossom made of weight and time. Inside stairs, cut from earth, old, descending in a perfect spiral, just like the mark. Bryce's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're not going down there?" Lena nodded once. "I have to." "No, you don't." "If I don't go," she said, "it comes up." She stepped onto the first stair. It didn't crumble, didn't shift. It welcomed her like it had been waiting. Bryce grabbed her wrist. "If you go, I go." She looked at him then, not as a partner, not as a friend, but as someone who didn't deserve to carry this, who had come this far anyway. "Then stay close." They descended in silence. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became, not unbearable, not dry, like breath, like being remembered by something ancient and patient. The stairs coiled tighter. The light from above disappeared, no torches, no flame. But the walls began to glow, soft amber veins through the stone. Familiar. The same glow that had pulsed in the well, the badge, the ash. They were inside it now, inside the memory of the fire. At the bottom of the spiral was a chamber, round, wide, empty, except for one thing. A shape standing at its center, not made of smoke, not ember, form. It was Lena, not her now, her then. Same clothes, same blood-slicked boots, same burns across her face, holding Rosa's body in her arms, unmoving, the past, frozen, waiting. Bryce took a step, then stopped, because the other Lena turned and looked at him, straight into his eyes, alive, present, impossible. Lena, the real Lena, spoke first. "I left part of myself here," she said. The version in the center mirrored her words. "I left part of myself here." The air around them shimmered, and then the form opened its mouth and spoke. Not in Lena's voice, not in Rosa's, in every voice from the Wall of Heroes, a chorus layered and pulsing. "You carried us back." Lena stepped forward. "I came to finish it." "No," said the form. "You came to complete it." The spiral glowed at their feet. Amber turned to white. Memory to truth. And Lena Briggs Calderon walked forward, straight into herself. The moment Lena stepped into herself, the chamber reacted like lungs pulling in a breath after years underwater. The walls rippled. The light surged. The ground didn't shake. It remembered. A pulse rolled outward from where she stood, silent but deep, stirring layers of sediment and memory, each buried event bubbling to the surface like truths long denied. Bryce shielded his face, but there was no heat, just pressure, like he was standing beneath the weight of everything she had survived. The two Lenas, real and remembered, merged. There was no sound, just sudden stillness, then her voice. But it didn't echo from her throat. It came from everywhere. "I see it now." She lifted her hands, both whole again. No burns, no blood, but marked. Spirals turning across the backs of her palms, faint, pulsing. The fire was never a punishment. It was a mirror. Bryce stared, chest tight. "A mirror of what?" he asked. "Grief," she said. And then the chamber walls began to move. Not collapse, expand, revealing more. Names, thousands of them, carved deep into the bedrock. No order, no alphabet. Some were symbols. Some were stories etched in images. Some were just rows of marks like tallies scratched in stone by people who never had names to begin with. "These are the ones who survived," she said. "The ones who carried it after they walked out." She turned to Bryce. "This thing, the fire, the root, it doesn't want destruction. It wants memory. It wants to be held by someone who understands what loss means." Bryce felt his knees weaken. "Is it Done with you?" Lena closed her eyes. "No." She opened them again. "But I'm done running from it." She stepped to the center of the chamber. The spiral beneath her feet opened. Not as a door, not as a pit, but as a light, white, warm, soundless. She raised her hand, and the spirals on her palms lit in response. Above them, the spiral path they'd descended began to glow. The entire staircase, stone, ash, memory, now pulsed like a living circuit. Lena looked over her shoulder. "It needs a watcher," she said. "One who chooses it, not one who runs." Bryce stepped forward. "No, you said it yourself. It marked you. You didn't ask for it." "I didn't," she said. "But I stayed." Bryce's jaw tightened. "You don't owe it anything." "No," she agreed. "But they do." She pointed to the walls again. The names, the unfinished stories, the memories screaming for closure. "This fire doesn't just burn what was," she said. "It carries what might have been." She took a breath. "I can carry that." Bryce didn't argue, didn't beg. He just stepped close, held out his hand. She took it. No fire between them, just warmth. He looked at her one last time. "Promise me something." "Anything. If it ever forgets you." He swallowed. "Come back." She smiled. "Memory never forgets." And then the chamber sealed around her. Bryce emerged from the spiral just after sunrise. The well was closed again, stone lid whole, unbroken, covered in a thin layer of dew. No glow, no heat, just the quiet hum of the earth beneath his boots and the scent of cedar smoke fading from the breeze. The horses in the paddock stood calm, ears flicking lazily. No more panic, no more pacing the fence line. The wind blew eastward again, like it used to. Everything was still, too still. He walked back toward the house slowly, Lena's last words echoing in his ears. Memory never forgets. The porch creaked as he climbed the steps. The screen door stuck like always. Inside, the house was unchanged. Her boots were by the door. Her coat was still slung over the chair. The thermos she'd left on the counter was empty now and bone dry. But her axe? Gone. Where it had rested for weeks, only a scorched ring remained. Bryce picked up the photograph she'd left on the table, the one of her and Rosa, standing in front of the Granite Ridge station. A new mark had appeared at the bottom corner of the frame, a spiral, faint, as if drawn with heat itself. He didn't frame it. He took it out back and buried it beneath the old cedar. The one that had stood before the ridge fire reached them all. He poured salt around the roots, laid one of her old ribbons atop the soil, a token, a tether. 2 days passed before he heard her again. Just a whisper, carried on the wind through the barn rafters. He'd been brushing the old gelding, Doc, the last of the herd that remembered that fire, and had nearly missed it. But it came again, clear. "You can rest now." He didn't answer, didn't have to. That night, when he walked the edge of the field, he saw the glow, a single ember tucked into the horizon like the last star fading before dawn. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a sign. The fire still lived. But it had chosen someone who understood it now, someone who wouldn't run, someone who would remember. 10 years later, no one remembered Granite Ridge. Not officially. The road that led to it had been overgrown, reclassified, and eventually wiped from county maps. Even the fire records had been archived in a dark place, where redacted lines outnumbered facts. New hires didn't ask about it. Old ones retired quietly. It was like the land had swallowed the story whole. But Bryce remembered. He stayed on the ranch long after the others moved on, managed it quietly, fixed what needed fixing, let the fences rot where the horses no longer wandered. The spiral stone where the well had once pulsed was now covered in ivy, but he never stepped on it, never cut it back. Some lines weren't meant to be crossed again. He kept Lena's room exactly as she'd left it. Boots, coat, empty thermos. A box on the shelf marked "Do Not Burn," Inside, the spiral-carved badge, a small pouch of red dust, and the last photo of her ever taken, facing the ridge, her back to the camera, spiral scar glowing faintly in her palm. The fire didn't come back, not in the way people expected. It didn't burn barns or forests or fields. It burned quietly. It showed up in sparks where grief lived. In the way a woman in Arizona claimed her dead brother spoke to her through the heat of a welding torch. In a town in Wyoming where 3 barns caught fire the same week, a wildfire survivor moved in and then vanished. In a shuttered firehouse in Colorado, where the siren wailed every Sunday at 3:14 a.m., even though the wires had long since been torn out. Whispers, smoke, reminders. Bryce read about them all, cut the clippings, filed the reports, traced the dates. The patterns weren't exact, but the feeling was. And every year, on the day the ridge closed, he walked to the old spiral at dawn. He didn't say anything, didn't light candles or lay offerings. He just stood, because that was enough. Memory didn't need permission. It only needed space. One day a letter arrived. No return address, no stamp. Just a single spiral etched into the envelope. Inside, a photo of a girl, 16, maybe 17. Wild curls, dark eyes, holding a fire axe in one hand, palm raised to the camera, spiral mark glowing faintly. On the back, 3 words. She remembers you. Bryce sat with the photo in his lap for hours. Didn't move, didn't blink. When the wind picked up that evening, he stepped outside. The sky was copper, the air warm, and somewhere, far away but familiar, he smelled cedar smoke. He didn't go inside. He walked to the spiral stone. Kneeling beside it, he set the photo down in the grass. And for the first time in a decade, he whispered her name out loud. Lena. The wind stopped. The silence deepened. And from below the soil, warm as breath, came the soft hum of something alive. Not flame, not danger, just memory. Still turning, still waiting, still watching. She didn't ask permission. The girl from the photo arrived 3 weeks later, riding in on an old Kawasaki motorcycle that sputtered like it had been through hell and never fully healed. The dust trail she kicked up stretched half a mile behind her. Bryce heard her coming long before he saw her. When she pulled into the yard, she didn't smile. She didn't remove her helmet. She parked, dismounted, and looked straight at the spiral stone. "Name?" he asked, stepping off the porch. "Call me Ash." She didn't offer more. Didn't need to. The spiral on her palm glowed faintly as she adjusted her jacket sleeve. It was the same pattern Lena bore, the same color, the same low pulse. But there was something else in her eyes. Less burden, more willingness. This wasn't someone who'd stumbled into the flame. This was someone who walked toward it. "I figured I'd find you still breathing," she said, finally removing her helmet. She looked young but not soft. Sun-touched skin, soot-streaked collar, a burn scar under her chin that hadn't faded properly. Her eyes were older than her bones. "I've been watching the lines," she said. "They're not just waking up." Bryce nodded. "They're spreading." Ash looked toward the field where the ridge had once pulsed behind Lena's spine like a living compass. "I found one in Arkansas," she said. "Middle of nowhere. No fire reported. But there was a spiral carved into the underside of a tractor. The kid who found it hasn't spoken since." Bryce rubbed the back of his neck. "You carry Lena's mark," he said. "That mean you carry her memory too?" Ash smiled faintly. "More than that, I carry her map." She pulled a notebook from her jacket, weatherproof, thick, filled with coordinates, photos, clipped articles, sketched symbols, half-burned pages torn from old reports. Bryce opened it. Inside the front cover, a single sentence. "When they start remembering, we have to show them how to forget." He swallowed hard. She knew this wasn't over, Ash said. She knew the fire was never the threat. What remembers us through the fire, that's the threat. Bryce looked at the spiral stone. It hadn't pulsed in years, until today. "She buried it," he said. "She slowed it down," Ash corrected. "That's all we ever do." She pulled the fire axe from a saddlebag. Lena's, still scorched, still etched with names up the handle. She ran her thumb across it and stared off into the west. "There's another flare in California. Old Mission ruins. Wildfire came through last year. Nothing left standing but one room. Inside, spiral pattern on the walls, carved in heat. No source." She strapped the axe to her back and looked at him. "You coming, or do I go alone?" Bryce looked down at his hands. They were older now, slower, but not weak. Not yet. "I don't know how much I've got left," he said. Ash smiled. "That's all right. You just need to remember enough to get us there." They left before sunset. Didn't pack much, just the map, the axe, and the silence of a land that still breathed through its roots. The spiral didn't pulse when they crossed the fence, but it watched them go. And, somewhere out west, a piece of sky glowed orange without smoke. They reached the California line under an amber sky. Ash didn't say much on the drive, just rode ahead, visor down, eyes locked on a horizon Bryce couldn't see. The road twisted through canyon country and dried riverbeds, past ghost towns and brush-scarred miles where everything had burned at least once. Some fires had been natural, others had not. He recognized the difference now. The natural ones left behind blackened earth and carbon ash. The other kind left behind silence, spirals, people who didn't speak anymore. They arrived at the ruins just after dark. The old mission was mostly rubble, sun-bleached stone arches half-collapsed, wooden beams scorched and splintered into bones. The wildfire that had taken the area 6 months prior was ruled a flash burn. No origin point, no lightning, no human cause. But the chapel still stood, stone intact, unburned. And inside the chapel, carved into the back wall, was the spiral, 6 feet across, made not with hand or tool, but heat. Ash ran her palm across it. The mark on her hand glowed in sync. Bryce felt the hairs on his arms rise. "They weren't just burning through the land," she said softly. "They were marking it, threading a network through memory, through grief." Bryce looked down. Symbols lined the floor, charcoal scrawlings, some fresh, some barely visible. One name repeated. Elsie. Ash dropped her bag and pulled out a packet of red dust. "I've only got enough for 1 ring," she said. "We light it, and whatever this is," she nodded toward the wall, "either speaks or burns." They circled the room. She lit it. The flames flared tall, then dropped into a steady hum, blue fire, cold as snow. The spiral began to turn, literally. The stone twisted inward, not fast, not violent, but in deliberate rotation like a key unlocking something beneath it. The ground quaked, not across the land, just underneath them. And then a voice echoed from the spiral, not from within it, but from every wall of the chapel. Ash stepped back, but Bryce stood still. He recognized the voice, Lena. She was speaking, but not to them, to someone else. A message burned into the foundation of the chapel itself. "If you've found this, then it means the line held. But it won't hold forever. We were just the first, the ones who saw what fire was really for." Ash gritted her teeth. "She's talking about the old watchers." The voice continued. "It needs new anchors. You, whoever you are, if you can remember the spiral, you can survive it. If you can carry the fire, you can quiet it. But don't feed it. Don't worship it. And for God's sake, don't ever name it." The spiral stopped turning. The room fell still. Ash turned to Bryce. "She left us a map." He nodded slowly. "And a warning." Outside, wind scattered ash across the old stone floor. Above them, the stars pulsed red, not from light, but from flame, waiting, watching. They didn't sleep that night. Ash sat with her back against the chapel wall, Bryce pacing in slow, steady lines outside the fire ring. The spiral on the stone had cooled again, but the air still vibrated faintly, like the ground itself was holding its breath. They could hear something beyond the hills, not wind, not coyotes, something that cracked and groaned like old wood settling, but from beneath the soil, a pressure shift, like something deep was turning over, waking. Ash finally broke the silence. "There are others like me," she said. "Some of them don't even know yet. Some do, and they're running. One's hiding in the Rockies, another in a coastal town in Oregon. And there's someone down south who's been collecting spiral fragments, clay, charcoal, melted glass with heat signatures that don't match any known temp." Bryce stopped pacing. "Fragments?" Ash nodded. "Every time someone dreams of the spiral, something physical forms nearby, a symbol burned into bark, a scorch pattern in a tile floor. Once it appeared on someone's skin like a birthmark. The Watchers. We thought we were alone, but we're not. The spiral's been waking people for years." Bryce knelt by the edge of the ring. "And the fire? What's it doing while this happens?" "Choosing." "Choosing what?" Ash looked up at the chapel ceiling, cracked, ash-lined, flaking with age. "Hosts." That word hung heavier than the silence. She pulled out Lena's old journal, flipping to a page marked with a curled slip of charred ribbon. The sketch on the page was rough but clear, a diagram of a human body overlaid with spirals along the spine, hands, and throat. Beneath it, a sentence in Lena's handwriting. "The fire doesn't speak. It rides." Bryce's voice turned low. "That thing we buried," Ash nodded, "was just the first rider. The fire wasn't the weapon. It was the vessel, and it needed a will strong enough to hold it." Ash flipped to another page, a list of towns and dates, some crossed out, others underlined in red. Some Bryce recognized. Others had never made the news. "We've been tracking flare events like these for a while," Ash said. "Most of the time it ends in silence. A barn burning down, a child who stops speaking, a survivor who refuses to explain what they saw. But a few leave behind spirals. And that means the fire found a rider," Ash nodded, "or was rejected by one." Bryce sat heavily against the opposite wall. "And Lena?" "She didn't just hold it," Ash said. "She broke its cycle. First one who didn't feed it, didn't fear it, didn't flee from it. That's why it remembers her. That's why I carry her spiral. I didn't inherit it. She passed it." Outside, something howled. Not near, not far, not animal. Ash stood. "We have to go." Bryce rose. "Where?" She showed him the next town on the map, a mining community in Nevada. Spiral carved into the rock face outside a collapsed shaft. No fire yet, just heat, just pressure. A memory trying to breathe. "Lena's message said if they start remembering, we show them how to forget," Bryce muttered. "What if they don't want to?" Ash strapped the axe to her back. "Then we burn the memory before it remembers us first." The Nevada town didn't have a name anymore. The map labeled it as Site 27B, a decommissioned mining settlement that had lost power, funding, and eventually people. A handful of buildings still stood, slumped wooden cabins, a collapsed church, and the remains of a rusted-out general store whose sign read, "All dust returns." Ash and Bryce arrived just after sundown. The heat was unnatural. No sun overhead, no fire, but the air pressed against their skin like it wanted to settle inside them. Ash dismounted the bike and pulled Lena's axe from the bag. She didn't wait for permission. She never did. Bryce followed with the journal tucked under his arm, thumb marking the latest page. Coordinates, patterns. A new sketch Lena had left on the back of a fuel receipt, 3 spirals stacked vertically, like vertebrae, a spine for something that could stand. They made their way toward the collapsed shaft. The spiral was there. Cut into the granite, just above the mine entrance, 15 feet wide, too precise for any man to have carved with hand tools. The grooves glistened, not with water, not oil, but heat, a slow pulsing ember that moved beneath the rock like it was breathing. Ash stepped forward and pressed her hand against it. The mark on her palm flared. Bryce watched her knuckles turn white. "Talk to me," he said. Her voice came out distant. "It's not just a gate. It's a womb. Something's forming beneath it." She staggered back, breathing hard, sweat running down her spine. "It's a rider." "Already inside someone?" She shook her head. "Not yet, but close. It's looking, reaching." She knelt and poured a thin line of red dust along the mouth of the shaft. Bryce struck the match. The line caught and burned inward, fast, bright, too fast, and vanished into the mine's throat. Then silence. Bryce felt the ground throb once beneath his boots. The spiral pulsed. Then it spoke. Not with words, with remembrance. They both saw it. Lena, the final fire, the chapel, the well. But then it pulled deeper. It showed more. Things Lena never spoke of. A fire from before she was born. An old town burning in 1912. A family of 5 buried under stone because the flames had no path and needed a voice. An orphan who walked from that fire with soot-covered hands and eyes that never stopped glowing. The spiral remembered all of it. Every rider, every failure, every survivor who tried to bury it and failed. Ash fell to one knee. The mark on her palm blistered, bubbled, peeled back into skin. "No," she whispered. The spiral's pulse quickened. "She's not ready," Bryce said, stepping in front of her. Then he heard it. A voice from deep inside the mine. A child's voice. "Hello?" Bryce's blood ran cold. "Hello, I'm lost." Ash stood, eyes wide. "Don't answer it." "I'm hurt," the voice said, closer now. Bryce looked down the shaft. Just blackness. Then 2 small lights, and not eyes. Embers. Ash raised the axe. "They're trying to trick us." "Who?" "Whoever used to be real." The wind kicked up. Ash moved fast, drawing the last of the red dust into a circle, pulling Bryce in with her as the spiral above them flared one final time. Then something stepped from the mine. Not a child, not any more. Thin, long-limbed, wrapped in soot and smoke. Its joints popping backward with each step. It wore the idea of a child, the way memory does. The clothes were right, the shoes, the voice, but the face had too many eyes, and every one of them was hers, Lena's. The thing in the mine's mouth stood motionless. Smoke curled from its shoulders like steam off fresh ash. The eyes, each one an imperfect replica of Lena's, blinked out of sync. Some cried, some stared, one wept blood. The body was wrong, too long in the arms. No fingernails, just smooth, charred fingertips that pulsed with a low red light. Ash stepped forward. Bryce grabbed her wrist. "Ash!" She shook him off. "If I run now, it finds someone else." The thing tilted its head. The child's voice came again, soft and honeyed. "You remember me. That's enough." Ash's jaw tightened. "You're not her." The creature took a step forward. Each footfall left scorched rings in the dust. It spoke again, and this time all the voices came layered together. Lena's, Rosa's, her own, Bryce's, dozens of others who must have stood in the spiral before her. "I am what you forgot. I am what she gave away." Ash held Lena's axe steady. "What do you want?" "To belong," the thing said. "To ride." Ash turned to Bryce, her voice low and hard. "It can't just take a host. It needs permission. That's why it mimics." He nodded slowly. "Then don't give it one." But the spiral above them pulsed once more, bright, hot, and the air around them shrank. The mine's mouth groaned wider. Cracks spread across the stone like veins filling with blood. The creature stepped into the red dust circle. Ash swung the axe. The blade met its shoulder and stuck. No blood, no scream, just a flash of white heat that sent her staggering back. The creature grabbed the axe and pulled it in. Ash's spiral flared on her palm, bright gold for the first time. Bryce shouted, "Burn it now!" Ash dropped to one knee, drew the spiral with her finger in the dust beside the creature. The ground pulsed. The spiral completed and ignited. The fire that erupted wasn't orange or blue, it was memory. They saw Lena's death again, but differently. This time, she was smiling. They saw the old chapel collapsing as red light bled into the earth. They saw the ridge fire from above. A map branching like a nervous system through time, through soil, through grief. The spiral screamed. The creature shrieked, all eyes melting into a smear of flickering faces. Ash stepped into the fire. It wrapped around her but didn't touch her. She reached out and pressed her palm to the creature's forehead. "You're not mine to carry," she said. "I choose." The spiral on her hand lit white-hot. The thing convulsed. Its body cracked. Steam hissed from every joint. The eyes closed one by one, then silence. The fire collapsed inward like a breath drawn deep. The spiral faded. Ash fell to her knees. Bryce ran to her side, pulled her clear of the dust ring. She coughed once, laughed dryly. It asked. He looked at her. She was shaking, but she was alive. "What did you say?" Ash closed her eyes. "I said no." They left Site 27B in silence. The road behind them disappeared in heat waves, even though the air was cool. Bryce didn't ask questions. Ash didn't offer answers. The spiral on her palm had dimmed, but hadn't gone out. It pulsed now only when she touched stone, when she passed dry trees, when the wind carried the scent of old fire. It had changed her. Not in the way the fire had twisted the others, those who burned, those who echoed, those who wore borrowed voices, but in the way water carves its mark without being asked, slowly, permanently. They stopped just outside a town called Glen Hollis. No fire events on record, no spirals reported. But the sky looked wrong, not orange, not smoky, just heavy, like the clouds were full of names and didn't know how to rain. Ash took Lena's journal from her pack. Bryce had added new pages, a fresh map. Red circles over the last 6 confirmed spiral sites. 3 more faint ones, still whispers. Glen Hollis was one of them. They parked near an old hardware store that had long since been shuttered. Dust covered the windows, but inside, someone had drawn a spiral in chalk across the entire floor, children's chalk, pink and blue. It was fresh. Ash stepped inside, and the spiral on her hand glowed once, bright, and then went cold. "No heat," she said. Bryce knelt near the markings. "What's that mean?" Ash ran her fingers along the floor. "This one didn't form from fire. It formed from fear." He looked up. "You said memory feeds it." She nodded. "But fear seeds it." A voice came from the stairwell in the back. "Are you here to stop it?" A boy, 12 maybe, face pale, eyes hollow. He held a lighter in one hand, a small tin of gas in the other. "I was going to burn it," he said. Ash walked to him slowly. "Why?" "Because it talks to me, in my sleep. It keeps telling me where the fire would go if I let it." She took the lighter, set it gently on the shelf. Bryce crouched beside the chalk spiral. The center had been smudged, not by feet, by fingers, scratched until the wood beneath showed through. "How long has it been here?" Bryce asked. The boy shrugged. "I woke up and it was just there." Ash reached into her jacket, took out a small vial of red dust. She poured it over the center of the spiral. The boy stepped back. The dust didn't light. It sank, right into the floor, gone. Ash went pale. "It's not just a mark, it's a mouth." Bryce stood. "Then we bury it?" Ash shook her head. "No, it's too late for that." Outside, thunder rolled, the first since Nevada. The wind picked up, scattering trash and dried leaves down the street. And above the store, the clouds spiraled, not from weather, from memory. Ash turned to the boy. "You remember it too, don't you?" The boy looked at the floor, nodded. Ash placed her hand on his shoulder. Then we end it here. The spiral above the store began to spin, not fast, not violently, but with purpose. The clouds curved inward like the sky was folding around an invisible drain. Wind pulled at signs, shook shutters, lifted dust in soft coils from the streets. Bryce stood in the doorway of the hardware store and watched Glen Hollis exhale its silence like a breath held too long. Ash crouched beside the chalk spiral. The red dust was gone, absorbed into the wood like blood into linen. The boy sat on a stool near the wall, hands clenched tight in his lap. He hadn't spoken since. "What's your name?" she asked. "Micah," he said softly. "How long has it been talking to you?" He didn't look at her. "Since the fire last year, the one across the ridge. It didn't touch our house, but I heard it whispering under my bed, even after the smoke cleared." Ash nodded. "It remembered you." Micah blinked. "Why?" "Because you were near it, and you didn't break. You listened, and you carried it." He looked up then, and Ash saw the truth. The spiral was already on him, not on his skin, behind his eyes, the same way it had marked her when she was too young to understand, too angry to question it. The fire never forced itself. It waited. It watched. It chose. And it had chosen Micah. She stood and stepped outside. The spiral in the clouds had grown larger. People were beginning to gather, silent, uneasy, like their instincts knew what their memories would not allow. Bryce joined her. "They're seeing it, aren't they?" She nodded. "They just don't know how to name it." Bryce frowned. "Does it matter if they don't say it out loud?" Ash's voice dropped. "It only matters if they say it out loud." Behind them, the bell above the store door jingled. Micah stepped out. The spiral on his shirt, a random graphic, began to glow faintly, red then gold. Ash drew a circle around him in the gravel. Dustless. Only steps. She walked in a perfect spiral, her boots imprinting a memory only the land would understand. She didn't light a flame. She didn't speak a word. She just walked. Micah stood still. Inside the spiral, he raised his hand. And for a heartbeat, every window in Glen Hollis lit orange. Not fire. Memory. People dropped to their knees. Some wept, some laughed. One woman began naming her siblings who died decades ago. A man cried out for a dog buried since 1983. A child said a name no one knew, until his mother collapsed, sobbing. It wasn't fire. It was everything that had never been spoken. Ash completed the last turn and placed her palm to the dirt. The spiral pulsed. Micah lowered his hand. The light faded, and the sky stilled. No smoke, no flame, just truth. Returned. Ash breathed deep. Bryce exhaled slow. Micah looked at them both. "Did I do it?" Ash smiled gently. "You carried it well." And beneath the street, unseen, the spiral turned once more. But this time, it did not open. It rested.